ladies and gentlemen. There's a moment we all experience, that delicate moment when we show up in the world fully as ourselves, and instead of applause or acceptance, we are met with resistance. It can be subtle, a raised eyebrow, a glance sideways, or maybe an awkward silence in a room that was once buzzing with energy. But sometimes it's more pronounced. It comes in the form of direct rejection, gossip, or worse, outright hatred. Hatred is a heavy word. It's visceral. It's the kind of emotion that lingers in the air, hanging around like smoke after a fire. But when I say let them hate you, I don't say it lightly. I'm not encouraging recklessness or promoting the kind of behavior that disregards others' feelings. What I am asking you to do is to recognize that when you live in your truth, when you are fully seen, some people will be uncomfortable. Some will misunderstand you, others will reject you, and yes, some will hate you. And that's okay. The price of authenticity is steep. The road to self-discovery and living in alignment with who we are isn't paved with flowers and light. It's bumpy, unpredictable, and yes, sometimes quite lonely. We grow up wanting to belong. It's hardwired into our DNA, the desire to be liked, to be part of something, to feel a sense of connection with others. Belonging is a basic human need. But sometimes we confuse belonging with fitting in. And these are not the same. Fitting in is about molding yourself to be what others expect. It's about sanding down your rough edges to make sure you don't stand out too much. It's about suppressing the parts of yourself that may seem different or strange in an effort to avoid criticism, judgment, or exclusion. It feels safer to blend in. But here's the thing: when you trade your authenticity for approval, you are giving away pieces of yourself. And each time you do that, you feel a little smaller, a little more hollow, until you hardly recognize yourself anymore. Belonging, on the other hand, is about being accepted for who you are, not for who you pretend to be. True belonging is only possible when you are willing to stand in your own skin, to own your story, and to accept that not everyone will like that version of you. In fact, some people might hate it, and that's the cost of authenticity. But the reward, it's freedom. Vulnerability often feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a void of the unknown. Will we be caught? Will we be caught? Will we be judged? Will we be rejected? Vulnerability is terrifying, but it's also where we find our true strength. It's where we connect deeply with others and, more importantly, with ourselves. When we open ourselves up, when we take the risk to be real and raw, we are often surprised by what happens. Sometimes people will meet you where you are. They'll see you, and in that moment recognize a part of themselves in your story. They'll realize they're not alone in their own fears and uncertainties. But other times people won't. They'll close off. They'll project their own insecurities onto you. They might mock you, criticize you, or turn away entirely. But this is the heart of vulnerability. It isn't about the outcome. It's about the act itself. It's about showing up fully and authentically, regardless of how you are received. It's about having the courage to be disliked, to be misunderstood, and yes, to be hated all, while knowing that your worth is not tied to anyone else's approval. Living authentically requires courage, not the kind of courage we see in superhero movies or in grand, dramatic gestures, but the quiet, consistent courage of showing up each day as who you are. The courage to speak your truth even when your voice shakes. The courage to set boundaries even when people push back. The courage to say no to the roles and expectations that others try to impose on you. Choosing courage over comfort isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things we can do. We live in a world that often values compliance over authenticity, where fitting in feels safer than standing out. But when we choose comfort over courage, we limit ourselves, we stifle our creativity, our passions, and our potential. We shrink ourselves to fit into boxes that were never meant for us. But when we choose courage, we expand. We grow into the fullness of who we are. We open ourselves to possibility, to connection, and to joy real, deep joy. The kind of joy that can only come when we are living in alignment with our true selves. One of the biggest barriers to living authentically is the fear of imperfection. We are terrified of being seen as flawed, as not good enough, as somehow less than. But here's the truth: we are all imperfect. Every single one of us. And it's in our imperfections that we find our humanity. When we allow ourselves to be imperfect, when we embrace our flaws and shortcomings, we give others permission to do the same. We create a space where it's okay to be human, where it's okay to make mistakes, to stumble, to fall short. And in that space, we find connection, we find empathy, we find belonging. But when we hide our imperfections, when we put up a facade of perfection, we create distance. We push people away. We isolate ourselves. And worse, we reinforce the idea that in order to be loved or accepted, we must be perfect. But perfection is a myth. It's unattainable. And striving for it only leads to exhaustion, frustration, and disconnection. So let them see your imperfections. Let them see your messiness, your vulnerability, your humanity. Let them see you as you are, because that's where your power lies. That's where your beauty lies, not in being perfect, but in being real. No matter what you do in life, no matter how kind, thoughtful, or well-intentioned you are, someone will criticize you. Someone will judge you. Someone will hate you. It's inevitable. You could spend your entire life trying to avoid it bending over backward to please others, walking on eggshells to avoid offending anyone, holding yourself back to fit into the mold of what others expect. But even then, you will still face criticism, because the truth is, people's opinions of you have very little to do with you and everything to do with them. When someone criticizes you, it's often a reflection of their own insecurities, their own fears, their own unresolved pain. It's not about you. And yet we take it personally. We internalize it. We let it chip away at our self-worth, at our confidence, at our sense of who we are. But what if we didn't? What if instead of shrinking in the face of criticism, we stood tall? What if we let people hate us, judge us, criticize, and didn't let it define us? What if we chose to be disliked, to be misunderstood, to be hated, all in the service of living our truth? One of the most liberating things you can do is let go of the need for approval. When you stop seeking validation from others, when you stop trying to win everyone over, you free yourself. You free yourself to live fully, to take risks, to be bold, to be brave. You free yourself to follow your passions, to pursue your dreams, to speak your truth. But letting go of the need for approval is hard. It goes against everything we've been taught. We've been conditioned to seek approval from the time we were children from our parents, our teachers, our peers. We've been taught that our worth is tied to how well we meet others' expectations, to how much we are liked, to how much we fit in. But the truth is, your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion of you. Your worth is inherent. It's intrinsic. You are worthy simply because you exist. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to earn it. And you certainly don't need anyone else's approval to validate it. So let them hate you, let them criticize you, let them misunderstand you, because their opinions do not define you. You define you, your worth, your value, your truth. These are things that no one can take away from you. Standing in your truth is one of the most powerful things you can do. It's also one of the most difficult. Because standing in your truth means being willing to be seen. It means being willing to be vulnerable, to be imperfect, to be criticized, and yes, to be hated. It means having the courage to show up fully as yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky, even when it means standing alone. But standing in your truth is also where you find your power. It's where you find your voice. It's where you find your freedom. When you stand in your truth, you are no longer bound by the expectations of others. You are no longer confined by the need for approval. You are no longer limited by fear. You are free to be who you are, unapologetically, authentically, and fully. And in standing in your truth, you give others permission to do the same. You create a ripple effect. You inspire others to step into their own truth, to own their own stories, to live their own lives authentically. And in doing so, you create a world where we can all show up as ourselves, where we can all be seen, where we can all belong. There's a quote that says, "The only way to avoid criticism is to do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to be invisible. We're not here to play small. We're here to be seen, to be heard, to make an impact, to live our lives fully." And that means being willing to be disliked, being willing to be misunderstood, being willing to be hated. It takes courage to stand up and say, "This is who I am," knowing full well that not everyone will accept you. Not everyone will understand you. Some will try to diminish you, to box you into categories that make sense to them, to label you in ways that reduce the complexity of your being. But you can't control that. You can't control how others see you, interpret you, or respond to you. What you can control is how you respond to yourself. You get to decide whether you let the judgment of others define you. You get to decide whether you shrink in the face of criticism or stand tall in your truth. You get to decide whether you spend your life seeking approval from others or living authentically. You get to decide whether you let their hatred break you or fuel you. When I say let them hate you, what I really mean is let them have their opinions. Let them project their fears, their insecurities, their judgments onto you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them dislike you. Let them gossip about you. Let them say what they will. Because at the end of the day, their opinions are not a reflection of you, they're a reflection of them. The people who hate you are often the people who are most threatened by your authenticity. They are the ones who are most uncomfortable with your courage to be yourself, because it shines a light on the places where they are not living fully. Your willingness to stand in your truth forces them to confront the ways in which they are hiding from their own truth. And that makes them uncomfortable. That makes them angry. That makes them hate you. But here's the thing, their hatred is not your problem. It's not your responsibility to make others comfortable. It's not your job to diminish yourself so that others can feel secure in their own choices. Your job is to be you. Fully, unapologetically, boldly, and bravely. One of the greatest myths we've been sold is the idea that it's possible to be universally liked, that if we just say the right things, behave in the right ways, and follow the right rules, we can avoid conflict, criticism, or hatred. But this is a lie. Universal approval is impossible. No matter how perfectly you try to live your life, someone will find fault. Someone will disagree with your choices. Someone will dislike you, no matter what. The pursuit of universal approval is a trap. It's a hamster wheel that keeps you running in circles, always striving, always exhausted, but never getting anywhere. And the truth is, even if you were able to achieve universal approval, it would come at a cost, the cost of your authenticity. To be universally liked, you would have to water yourself down. You would have to shave off the edges of your personality, smooth out the quirks, the complexities, the uniqueness that make you you. You would have to mold yourself to fit the expectations of others, to be what they want you to be rather than who you truly are. And in doing so, you would lose yourself. The reality is, the more authentically you live, the more fully you express who you are, the more you will polarize people. Some will love you for it. They will be drawn to your honesty, your bravery, your willingness to show up as yourself. They will feel inspired by your courage and liberated by your example, but others will not. They will reject you, criticize you, and yes, some will even hate you. And that's okay, because the goal is not to be universally liked. The goal is to be authentically you. There's a strange beauty in polarization. It's counterintuitive, but the more true to yourself you are, the more you will find your people, the ones who love you not in spite of who you are, but because of it. When you live authentically, you give others permission to see you for who you really are. And in doing so, you create space for true connection, for real belonging. When you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to anyone. You dilute yourself, and in doing so, you dilute your ability to connect deeply with others. But when you show up as you are, in all your messiness, your imperfection, your brilliance, and your boldness, you create the opportunity for real connection. Not everyone will like it. Not everyone will get it. Some will be repelled by it. But the people who are meant for you, the people who resonate with your truth, will find you. They will be drawn to you. And that kind of connection is worth far more than the approval of the masses. Polarization is not something to fear. It's something to embrace. It's a sign that you are living authentically, that you are standing in your truth. It's a sign that you are no longer trying to fit into the boxes that others have created for you. It's a sign that you are living boldly, unapologetically, and fully. We often play small because we think it will protect us. We think that if we just dim our light a little, if we just blend in, if we just don't make too much noise, we can avoid the discomfort of criticism, rejection, or hatred. But playing small doesn't protect you. It just limits you. When you play small, you are not only denying yourself the opportunity to live fully, but you are also denying the world the gift of your unique contribution. You are holding back your brilliance, your creativity, your passion, your ideas, all the things that make you you. And in doing so, you are depriving the world of what you have to offer. The world doesn't need more people who are playing small. The world needs people who are willing to step into their power, who are willing to be seen, who are willing to be seen, who are willing to take up space. The world needs people who are brave enough to stand in their truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it invites criticism, even when it invites hatred. Playing small may feel safer in the short term, but in the long term, it comes at a cost. The cost of your potential, the cost of your joy, the cost of your fulfillment, and the cost of your impact on the world. When you allow the opinions of others to dictate how you live your life, you are giving away your power. You are allowing external forces to determine your worth, your value, your choices. You are putting your happiness, your fulfillment, your sense of self in the hands of others. And that is a dangerous place to be. Reclaiming your power means taking ownership of your life. It means recognizing that your worth is not contingent upon anyone else's approval. It means standing in your truth, even when it's difficult, even when it's unpopular, even when it invites hatred. Reclaiming your power is not about being defiant for the sake of being defiant. It's not about being rebellious for the sake of rebellion. It's about aligning your life with your values, your beliefs, your truth. It's about living in a way that is true to who you are, regardless of how others respond. When you reclaim your power, you stop seeking validation from others. You stop letting their opinions control you. You stop giving them the power to define you. Instead, you define yourself. You decide who you are, what you stand for, and how you want to live your life. Part of reclaiming your power involves setting boundaries. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about protecting your energy, your time, and your sense of self. Boundaries are a way of saying, this is where I end and you begin. This is what I will tolerate, and this is what I will not. Setting boundaries can be difficult. especially when we are afraid of being disliked, of being seen as difficult or unkind. But boundaries are essential to living authentically. They are essential to protecting your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. When you set boundaries, you are not being selfish. You are being responsible. You are taking care of yourself so that you can show up fully in your life. And yes, some people may not like your boundaries. They may push back, criticize you, or even hate you for them. But that is their issue, not yours. Your job is not to please everyone. Your job is to take care of yourself, to honor your needs, and to live in alignment with your truth. Perfectionism is one of the greatest barriers to authenticity. It's the belief that we have to be flawless in order to be worthy, that we have to have it all together in order to be accepted, that we have to avoid mistakes at all costs. But perfectionism is a lie. It's an unattainable standard that keeps us stuck, small, and fearful. When we strive for perfection, we are not being brave, we are being afraid. We are afraid of being seen as imperfect, as flawed, as not good enough. But the truth is, we are all imperfect. We all make mistakes. We all fall short, and that's okay. Letting go of perfectionism means embracing our humanity. It means accepting that we are not perfect, that we will make mistakes, that we will fail, and that none of that diminishes our worth. It means recognizing that our imperfections are part of what make us beautiful, relatable, and human. When we let go of perfectionism, we free ourselves to take risks, to try new things, to step outside of our comfort zones. We free ourselves to be creative, to be bold, to be brave. We free ourselves to live fully. There is a strange liberation in being hated. It sounds counterintuitive, but when you are hated, you realize that you are no longer bound by the need for approval. You are no longer trying to please everyone. You are no longer playing small to fit into the boxes that others have created for you. Being hated means you have stepped into your power. You have chosen to live authentically, to stand in your truth, to take up space. You have chosen courage over comfort. You have chosen to be yourself, fully and unapologetically. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's painful. It can feel isolating at times. But it's also liberating. Because once you realize that you can survive being hated, once you realize that their hatred does not define you, you are free. Free to live your life on your terms. Free to pursue your passions, to follow your dreams, to speak your truth. Let them hate you. Because in their hatred, you will find your freedom. In their rejection, you will find your strength. In their criticism, you will find your courage. Resilience isn't about being unaffected by hatred, criticism, or rejection. It's about how we respond to it. It's about how we rise after we fall. It's about how we keep going when the world tells us to stop. When we live authentically, when we dare to be vulnerable, we will inevitably face setbacks. We will be knocked down by the harsh words of others, by their judgments, by their misunderstandings. But resilience is what allows us to get back up, to keep moving forward, to stand in our truth even when the ground beneath us feels shaky. Resilience is not something we are born with. It's something we cultivate, something we build over time. And the more we practice living authentically, the more resilient we become. Every time we choose to stand in our truth in the face of opposition, we strengthen our resilience. Every time we refuse to shrink in response to criticism, we build our capacity for endurance. Every time we choose to be ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it invites hatred, we become more resilient. Resilience is not about being tough, it's about being flexible. It's about adapting to the challenges we face without losing our sense of self. It's about bending without breaking. And it's about recognizing that the storms we face are not meant to destroy us, but to help us grow. Because every time we rise after we fall, every time we get back up after being knocked down, we become stronger, braver, more grounded in who we are. Rejection is one of the most painful experiences we can go through as human beings. Whether it's being rejected by a friend, a romantic partner, a family member, or society at large, it cuts deep. It makes us question our worth, our value, our place in the world. But rejection, as painful as it is also one of life's greatest teachers. Rejection teaches us about our strength. It shows us that we can survive things we didn't think we could. It shows us that we are more resilient than we realized, that we are capable of enduring hardship and coming out the other side stronger. Rejection also teaches us about our boundaries. It helps us clarify what we are willing to tolerate and what we are not. It helps us define our non-negotiables, the things we will not compromise on in order to be accepted. Rejection forces us to stand firm in our values, in our beliefs, in our truth. And perhaps most importantly, rejection teaches us about the power of self-acceptance. When we are rejected by others, we are faced with the choice: do we let their rejection define us, or do we choose to accept ourselves anyway? Do we let their judgment determine our worth, or do we decide that we are worthy regardless of their opinion? Self-acceptance is not about being perfect. It's not about having it all together or being immune to the pain of rejection. It's about recognizing that our worth is not contingent on anyone else's approval. It's about knowing that we are enough as we are, flaws and all, and that we don't need to change ourselves to fit someone else's idea of who we should be. Living authentically requires a great deal of self-compassion. It requires us to be kind to ourselves when we stumble, when we fall short, when we make mistakes. It requires us to give ourselves grace when we are imperfect, when we are criticized, when we are hated. Self-compassion is not about letting ourselves off the hook or avoiding responsibility. It's about acknowledging that we are human, that we are doing the best we can, and that we are worthy of love and acceptance even when we fall short. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend who is struggling. When we live authentically, we are going to face moments of doubt. We are going to question ourselves, our choices, our path. We are going to wonder if it's worth it. If we are strong enough, brave enough, resilient enough to keep going. And in those moments, self-compassion is what will carry us through. It's what will remind us that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy. We don't have to have all the answers to be valuable. We don't have to be universally liked to be enough. Self-compassion allows us to soften in the face of hatred rather than harden. It allows us to be gentle with ourselves when the world is harsh. It allows us to hold ourselves with tenderness, even when others try to tear us down. One of the greatest gifts of living authentically is that it allows you to find your people, the ones who see you for who you truly are and love you because of it, not in spite of it. When you live authentically, you attract the people who are aligned with your truth, with your values, with your essence. But finding your people requires you to be brave enough to show up as yourself. It requires you to be willing to let go of the need to be liked by everyone in order to be truly seen by the right ones. It requires you to take the risk of being rejected, of being criticized, of being hated, in order to find the people who will love you as you are. The relationships that are born out of authenticity are the ones that last. They are the ones that nourish your soul, that lift you up, that encourage you to keep going, even when the world feels heavy. These relationships are not based on superficial approval or mutual convenience. They are built on a deep, unshakable foundation of truth, trust, and vulnerability. But you can't find these relationships if you are hiding behind a mask. You can't connect deeply with others if you are pretending to be someone you're not. True connection requires true authenticity. It requires you to be brave enough to be seen, flaws and all, It requires you to let go of the need for approval in order to make room for real belonging. Living authentically not only transforms your life, but it also has the power to transform the world around you. When you live in alignment with your truth, you become a beacon for others who are seeking to do the same. You give them permission to step into their own authenticity, to embrace their own vulnerability, to live their own truth. The ripple effect of authenticity is powerful. When one person dares to live authentically, it creates a space for others to do the same. It challenges the status quo, disrupts the societal norms that tell us we have to fit into certain molds, and opens up new possibilities for how we can live, work, and relate to one another. Authenticity is contagious. When people see you living boldly, unapologetically, and fully, they are inspired to do the same. Your courage gives them courage. Your vulnerability gives them permission to be vulnerable. Your authenticity becomes a catalyst for transformation, not just in your own life, but in the lives of those around you. But transformation is not easy. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It requires you to confront the parts of yourself that you have been hiding, the parts that you have been afraid to show the world. It requires you to let go of the need for external validation and to trust that your truth is enough, that you are enough, just as you are. Each of us has a story to tell. And when we live authentically, when we dare to share that story with the world, we have the power to make an impact. Your story, your truth, your experience is unique to you. No one else has lived your life, felt your feelings, or walked your path. And because of that, your story matters. It has the power to inspire, to heal, to connect, and to transform. But sharing your story requires vulnerability. It requires you to be brave enough to say, this is who I am. This is what I've been through. This is what I've been through. This is what I've learned. It requires you to be willing to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, and sometimes to be misunderstood. Your story will not resonate with everyone. Some people will judge it. Some will dismiss it. Some will hate it. But that doesn't mean your story isn't worth telling. It doesn't mean your truth isn't worth sharing. The people who are meant to hear your story, the ones who need to hear it, will find it. And when they do, it will have a profound impact. You may never know the full extent of the impact your story has on others. You may never hear the words thank you from the people whose lives you touch. But that doesn't mean your story isn't making a difference. When you live authentically, when you share your truth with the world, you are planting seeds. And those seeds have the potential to grow into something beautiful, something transformative, something that makes the world a little brighter, a little more compassionate, a little more real. Fear is one of the greatest barriers to authenticity. The fear of being disliked, the fear of being rejected, the fear of being hated. These fears keep us small, keep us quiet, keep us from living fully. But the truth is, fear is a natural part of the human experience. It's not something we can eliminate entirely, nor should we try to. Fear has its purpose. It keeps us safe. It alerts us to danger. But when fear is in the driver's seat, it keeps us from growing, from expanding, from living authentically. Letting go of fear doesn't mean living without it. It means choosing to move forward in spite of it. It means recognizing that fear is a companion on the journey, but it doesn't get to dictate the terms. It means feeling the fear and doing it anyway, showing up as yourself, speaking your truth, living your life, even when it's scary, even when it invites criticism, even when it invites hatred. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the willingness to act in the face of it. And the more we practice courage, the more we build our capacity for it. Each time we choose to live authentically, even when we are afraid, we strengthen our courage. Each time we step into our truth, even when it's uncomfortable, we become braver. Each time we face the possibility of rejection, of criticism, of hatred, and choose to be ourselves anyway, we reclaim our power. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness. We are taught to protect ourselves, to guard our hearts, to hide the parts of ourselves that feel raw, fragile, and exposed. We are taught to build walls to keep ourselves safe from judgment, criticism, and hatred. But vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It's the courage to show up and be seen, even when there are no guarantees of acceptance. It's the willingness to open yourself up to others, to risk being hurt, to risk being misunderstood, because you know that true connection, true growth, and true authenticity can only happen when you are vulnerable. Living authentically requires vulnerability. It requires you to take off the masks you've been wearing, to let go of the stories you've been telling yourself about who you should be, and to stand in the truth of who you are. Vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, connection, and courage. It's what allows you to take risks, to try new things, to pursue your passions, even when you're afraid. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you open yourself up to the possibility of being hurt, but you also open yourself up to the possibility of being loved, accepted, and understood. You open yourself up to the possibility of real, meaningful connection. And yes, there will be people who will reject you, who will criticize you, who will hate you for your vulnerability. But there will also be people who will embrace you, who will be inspired by your courage, who will connect with you on a deeper level because of your willingness to be real. Vulnerability is not about oversharing or exposing every part of yourself to everyone. It's about being honest with yourself and with others about what you need, what you feel, and who you are. It's about showing up as your authentic self, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it invites judgment. And in that vulnerability, there is immense power. One of the most liberating aspects of living authentically is the freedom to embrace your imperfections. We live in a world that glorifies perfection, that tells us we have to have it all together, that we have to look a certain way, act a certain way, and live up to certain standards in order to be worthy. But the truth is, perfection is unattainable. It's a moving target that we will never reach. And in the pursuit of perfection, we lose sight of the beauty that comes from being human, from being real, from being imperfect. Embracing imperfection means letting go of the need to be flawless, to be right all the time, to have it all figured out. It means accepting that you will make mistakes, that you will fall short, that you will fail, and that none of that diminishes your worth. Your imperfections are not something to be ashamed of. They are what make you human. They are what make you relatable, approachable, and real. When you embrace your imperfections, you give yourself permission to show up as you are, rather than waiting until you are perfect to start living your life. You stop waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the right version of yourself to take action, to pursue your dreams, to live authentically. You recognize that you are enough right now as you are. And when you embrace your imperfections, you give others permission to do the same. You create a space where people feel safe to be themselves, where they don't have to pretend to have it all together. You create a culture of authenticity, where vulnerability is valued and where people are free to be human. This is the kind of environment where real connection, real growth, and real transformation can happen. Living authentically means owning your story, all of it. The beautiful parts, the messy parts, the parts that you might be tempted to hide because you think they make you less lovable, less worthy, less acceptable. But your story, in all its complexity, is what makes you who you are. It's what gives you depth, wisdom, and perspective. It's what shapes your values, your beliefs, and your truth. Owning your story means taking responsibility for your life, for your choices, for your experiences. It means not blaming others for your circumstances or playing the victim. It means acknowledging the hardships you've faced, the mistakes you've made, and the lessons you've learned, and recognizing that all of it has contributed to the person you are today. Owning your story also means not letting others define it for you. It means refusing to let the opinions, judgments, or criticisms of others dictate how you see yourself. It means standing in your truth, even when others try to rewrite your narrative to fit their own perceptions of you. It means knowing that you are the author of your own life and that you have the power to create a story that is true to who you are. When you own your story, you take back your power. You stop living according to other people's expectations, and you start living according to your own truth. You stop seeking validation from others, and you start trusting yourself. You stop hiding behind a version of yourself that you think will be more acceptable, and you start showing up as the real you. At the core of living authentically is the ability to trust yourself. Trusting yourself means believing that you know what's best for you, that you have the wisdom, the intuition, and the inner guidance to navigate your life. It means listening to your inner voice, even when it contradicts what others are telling you. It means having faith in your ability to make decisions, to take risks, to face challenges, and to keep moving forward, even when the path is uncertain. Self-trust is not something that comes naturally to most of us. We are taught from a young age to look outside of ourselves for answers, for approval, for validation. We are taught to doubt our instincts, to question our worth, to seek guidance from others before trusting our own judgment. But self-trust is something that can be cultivated, something that grows stronger the more we practice it. When you trust yourself, you become less dependent on the opinions of others. You become less concerned with what people think of you, less fearful of their judgment, less affected by their criticism. You start to rely more on your own inner compass, your own sense of what is right for you. And in doing so, you become more confident, more grounded, more at peace with who you are. Trusting yourself doesn't mean you will never make mistakes. It doesn't mean you will always have the answers or that you won't face uncertainty or doubt. But it does mean that you have faith in your ability to figure it out, to adapt, to learn, and to grow. It means knowing that no matter what happens, you have your own back. One of the most liberating aspects of living authentically is the freedom that comes from letting go of the need for approval, for validation, for external recognition. Letting go of the need to be perfect, to have it all together, to meet other people's expectations. Letting go of the fear of being disliked, of being judged, of being hated. When you let go of these things, you free yourself from the weight of other people's opinions. You free yourself from the constant striving to be something you're not, to live up to standards that are not your own. You free yourself from the pressure to perform, to please, to conform. And in that freedom, you find the space to be yourself. Letting go is not about giving up or resigning yourself to a life of mediocrity. It's about releasing the things that no longer serve you, the things that hold you back from living fully. It's about trusting that you are enough as you are, that you don't need to prove your worth or seek approval to be valuable. It's about recognizing that your happiness, your fulfillment, and your sense of self are not dependent on anyone else's validation. When you let go, you create space for something new. You create space for growth, for creativity, for joy. You create space for the things that truly matter to you, the things that align with your values, your passions, your truth. You create space for authentic connection, for real love, for deep fulfillment. Living authentically is not just about what you say or how you present yourself to the world. It's about how you embody your truth. It's about living in alignment with your values, with your beliefs, with who you are at your core. It's about making choices that reflect your truth, even when they are difficult, even when they go against the grain, even when they invite criticism or hatred. Embodying your truth means living with integrity. It means being honest with yourself and with others about what you need, what you want, and what you stand for. It means aligning your actions with your words, your choices with your values. It means showing up fully in your life, not just in the moments when it's easy or convenient, but in the moments when it's hard, when it's scary, when it's uncomfortable. When you embody your truth, you stop living for other people's approval. You stop making decisions based on what will make others happy or what will keep you in their good graces. You start living for yourself, for your own happiness, for your own fulfillment. And in doing so, you become more grounded, more confident, more at peace with who you are. Embodying your truth doesn't mean you will never face opposition. In fact, the more you live authentically, the more you will encounter resistance from others who are uncomfortable with your truth. But embodying your truth means being willing to stand in it anyway, to live it fully, even in the face of opposition, even in the face of hatred. One of the most powerful aspects of living authentically is the freedom to live without apologies. To stop apologizing for who you are, for what you believe, for the choices you make. To stop shrinking yourself to fit into other people's expectations. To stop saying sorry for taking up space, for having a voice, for being different. Living without apologies doesn't mean being arrogant or dismissive of others. It doesn't mean disregarding the impact of your actions or failing to take responsibility for your mistakes. It means living with confidence in who you are without feeling the need to explain, justify, or apologize for your existence. When you live without apologies, you give yourself permission to be fully and unapologetically yourself. You give yourself permission to pursue your dreams, to follow your passions, to speak your truth without worrying about whether it will make others uncomfortable. You give yourself permission to take up space, to be bold, to be seen, without feeling the need to diminish yourself to make others feel better. Living without apologies is about embracing your worth, your value, your uniqueness. It's about knowing that you don't need to seek permission to live your life on your own terms. It's about trusting that you are enough, just as you are, and that you don't owe anyone an apology for being yourself.